everyone, it's Allie, and today we're going to talk about the second season of Last Epoch and all the new things that are going to be coming with it. And I must say the devs really cooked on this one. We're going to get ourselves quite a lot of changes that are going to range from just core gameplay changes, with us getting a new dodge roll added permanently to the game, to reworks to classes such as the Sentinel and potentially a little bit for the Primalist, new endgame bosses, a new seasonal mechanic, a ton of new quality of life features, and of course, 30 new unique items to play with and to potentially empower new builds. In my opinion, this is probably the best thing they could have done for the second season of the game. A lot of the criticism that people had for the beginning of the game when it launched was that the game was great and the core features were amazing, but it lacked a lot of things to do in the endgame. While at the same time, some of the things, such as timelines, felt a little bit bad to progress through, and well, I think the devs completely delivered on all the things that people had issues with when the game released. Not only are we getting a pretty large rework to the endgame and to Monoliths, allowing us to progress faster on both our main characters and on our ult, but we're getting a whole new faction tied specifically to pushing your corruption and dealing with the endgame, which is going to honestly make the game feel a lot better. I feel like this is the best thing the devs could have done, as is just adding a lot of new teeth to the endgame of the game, and I think it's going to be an absolute banger. So let's look at everything that's added and dive into it a little bit deeper. So I think the elephant in the room that we should talk about first is going to be the new evade added into the game. This is going to be a new ability that you get access to starting at level 1, and it's going to scale with you, gaining increased cooldown recovery all the way up to level 100. This means it's going to start with a 4-second cooldown and lower itself all the way to 2 seconds. And the really nice thing, which the tooltip doesn't show, is that it's going to have 2 charges, making it feel pretty comfortable to use. Now, the thing about this is that it's not going to give you immunity frames. This is mostly going to be used as a repositioning tool mid-fights, and it's mostly going to be to help melee outs with their mobility issues. The other real interesting thing about this is that this could potentially allow some builds to just completely remove their mobility skill from their toolkit and simply just rely on evade. This might not be possible on some areas where you need an immunity dash, for example, dodging Lagon's beam, but if you're just simply speed farming Monoliths and you don't need to use your mobility skill as an immunity, you might actually end up having a stronger build by just simply relying on nothing but evade and your inherent movement speed in your kit, and then to just simply pick up a 5th new skill for your build, allowing you to potentially either go faster or give you more DPS or make you tankier. This is not going to necessarily be a replacement for mobility skills in your builds, but it's going to allow you to potentially cook a new way of putting builds together. It's going to relieve the pressure of pretty much every single build in the game needing a mobility skill in it. And even if you do still want to run a mobility skill, you can just use both of them together. They're not going to share cooldowns with each other, meaning you can mobility skill into a dash, giving you potentially quite a lot of additional mobility. When this was first released, I originally theorized that the reason they're adding this into the game was because they were attempting to make new mechanics and new bosses, but they were constantly struggling with the fact that all of the classes have a different amount of baseline mobility. And well, the devs pretty much confirmed exactly what I thought. The main reason this is being added to the game is because if they can add this in and assume everyone at least has access to evade, they can then design new and interesting mechanics and new interesting bosses that are going to be able to utilize your character's mobility. I think this is going to be really cool, and I'm excited to see how this is going to pan out with the new Pinnacle Boss that's going to come out with the season, and how they're going to incorporate mobility into that boss fight. Speaking about the Pinnacle Boss, we are getting ourselves a pretty massive addition to the endgame. We are going to be getting ourselves 2 new mini bosses, which are called the Harbingers, and they're going to be the key that are going to allow you to then go challenge the new Pinnacle Boss. We don't really know much about the Pinnacle Boss other than it's going to be the toughest battle in the game, and we've got a little bit of B-roll of it that we can see about the boss, which mostly just showcases how it's going to be a 4-phase fight, which is going to pull us through the different eras of the game, making us fight it in different timelines. I think it's going to be pretty cool, and I hope that they cooked this one, and I hope that the boss fight is going to be challenging but fun, and I really hope that the rewards are going to be up to par with how difficult they're making this boss fight out to be. The thing that we do know a lot about is going to be the new Harbingers and the new faction that is going to be attached to them, the Forgotten Knights. The Harbingers are going to be mini bosses they're going to be able to encounter through each of the different timelines. The cool thing about these is that you are going to effectively be forced to go and do every single timeline of the game to actually be able to have access to the Pinnacle Boss. Every time you defeat a Harbinger for your first 10, you're going to be given a guaranteed eye. After your first 10 Harbingers, your eyes are not going to be guaranteed anymore. They're only going to be a chance to drop off of the Harbingers, but these are going to be the keys that you are going to need to access Pinnacle Boss. This means on your first attempt at it at the start of a season, you're going to have 10 attempts before you need to go farm more, which I think is a pretty good buffer to allow you to learn the boss fight and learn how to get through all of its mechanics. The thing about these is that on your first 10, you need to go and encounter each Harbinger individually within each timeline. As we can see from the Forgotten Knight faction interface, we can see that they are going to require higher and higher corruption to be able to fight them, with the final one requiring you to be at 300 corruption to actually meet them. I really like this because typically currently in the endgame, you don't really interact with half of the timelines as their blessing rewards are kind of useless, giving you only drop enhancers, and for most people, those drop enhancers aren't really relevant. But now you'll have a reason to go to every single one of those timelines and actually progress to them to get access to Pinnacle Boss if you do want to fight it. The other interesting thing is that the Forgotten Knight faction will directly be tied to how many Harbingers you kill. Instead of you having a point system like you do for the Circle of Fortune and Merchant's Guild, and one thing I should mention here is that this is going to be entirely separate from those two factions. You can be in either Circle of Fortune or Merchant's Guild and be a part of the Forgotten Knights at the same time. This is not going to be a choice they're going to have to make, but each tier is going to directly be tied to how many Harbingers you killed. So if you killed a Harbinger, you're now level 1. If you killed 5 Harbingers, you're now level 5, and so on and so forth, meaning that by the time you get to the Pinnacle Boss, you will have the full faction unlocked. This faction is going to mostly deal with augmenting the endgame of the game. From the little bit of spoilers that they've shown us in the screenshot of the faction, we can see that at level 7, all Gaze of Orbis are now going to give 1 additional corruption, which effectively means we gain corruption 10% faster than before. The other notes here are honestly some really nice things, such as the level 8 perk, giving you double rolls on your blessings, making it substantially faster for you to get a max roll blessing if you specifically need one. With the other few ones that we can see here, giving us increased chances for the Harbingers to drop their specific items, for them to have a higher chance for Glyphs of Envy, and for the new Nemesis mechanic to have a higher chance of empowering your items. Speaking of Nemesis, let's talk about the new seasonal mechanic that we can expect in Season 2, Nemesis. Nemesis is going to be a mechanic that you'll be able to encounter pretty much anywhere in the world, kind of like how you can see an exiled mage anywhere. And the Nemesis itself is going to have 3 options when you interact with it. You can either banish it if you don't like any of the guaranteed rewards it's going to give you if you do successfully fight it and defeat it. You can empower it, which is going to make it run away, which is then going to make it even stronger the next time you encounter it, but also making the loot better. Or you can directly challenge it, which is going to allow you to fight a mini boss that is going to be relatively difficult, and I'm going to assume these are going to be a little bit harder than exiled mages, which when defeated are going to give you all the items that you saw in the interface. The interesting thing about these is that because you can encounter them in the campaign, this means you could potentially luck into a Nemesis giving you some sort of unique item that's really powerful for your build, potentially allowing you to progress through the early game at the start of a season a lot faster. The other interesting thing here is going to be that sometimes you'll be able to encounter an Egg of the Forgotten within the Nemesis interface, which allows you to replace one of the items with a unique item that you own that has both no legendary potential and no Weaver's Will. What this is going to then do is if you empower it, it's going to cook your item, potentially either giving it LP or potentially just adding stats to it as if you went into the Temporal Sanctum and deleted an item as a sacrifice. This is going to be really powerful for endgame items, and it definitely pushes the potential of builds a lot higher. As a good example of where this might be really good is with both of the uber uniques in the game, Red Ring and Ravenous Void. These are unbelievably rare items to where you're just going to be happy to see one of these drop on the ground in the first place, and the chance of you getting 1 LP on these items is so astronomically low that you most likely will not see a 1 LP version of either of these items for multiple seasons. With Nemesis, what you could potentially do is take your Red Ring or your Ravenous Void, put them into Nemesis window in power, and then potentially hope you win the roll for it to either add 1 LP onto your Ravenous Void or your Red Ring, or for you to win the roll of it just randomly adding a stat. This also gives you an incentive to potentially farm more of these items in the future. Because you're only going to have 1 attempt at each item, that means if you don't get something good on your Red Ring, for example, you could go get yourself another Red Ring, put it into the Nemesis window again, and potentially try for another new one. We don't exactly know the formula behind how this is going to be determined on what it gives to items, and if it's potentially weighted based on the rarity of an item, this means that you could potentially just go farm yourself a bunch of 0 LP versions of the item that you want, put them in here, and potentially have a pretty high chance of seeing maybe 3 or 4 LP versions of the item. The thing to mention here is that you cannot infinitely keep empowering an item. You could only attempt the empower twice, so you are going to have limited attempts on each item. I think this is going to be a pretty interesting new addition to Endgame, and it's going to allow you to make some pretty silly new items that are going to be really, really nice for being able to push your corruption a little bit higher. Speaking of pushing your corruption higher, we are getting some amazing changes to both how corruption is going to work in the future, as well as there now being a new catch-up for your alts that are going to allow you to get your characters into empowered monoliths even faster. The new addition to the game is going to be a crafting glyph called the Glyph of Envy. What this is going to do is it's going to randomly reroll your item, which I guess is kind of cool and potentially has some impacts to crafting. But the real kicker of what this item is going to do is it's going to give you stability on your current timeline. And because it's going to fully fill the stability of a non-empowered timeline, this means you could simply walk into a timeline, do one echo within it so it counts as your current timeline, then use a Glyph of Envy on an item, and then immediately instantaneously fill the bar to be able to go and fight the boss immediately, and then just be able to progress onto a different timeline. An example of where this is going to be amazing for alts is progressing to empowered monoliths as fast as possible. So let's say the season just started and I played my main character that I started the season with, got into empowered monoliths, got myself 7 Glyphs of Envy, and decided that, well, I'm kind of tired of this character and I want to try something new. I can then start a new character, level through the campaign, get to monoliths, and then immediately, once I get to monoliths, I can just go do one echo, use a Glyph of Envy, immediately get to 100 stability, fight the boss, go to Black Sun, for example, do the same thing, go to the Lagon area, go to Reign of Dragons, and basically effectively get to empowered monoliths on a new character in maybe 20 to 30 minutes at most. And to add to this, the devs are now adding a consumable into the game that is going to also make your progression even faster. While the Glyphs of Envy could be technically used to progress your corruption faster, the main tool that the devs now want you to use is going to be the Harbinger's Needle. This is going to be a small idol that you're going to have to socket into your idol slots, which is then going to be deleted whenever you kill a timeline boss above 90 corruption, which is then going to immediately give you 3 Gaze of Orbis. Because this has no limit on it, there's nothing stopping you from potentially filling your whole idol inventory with Harbinger needles, assuming you had that many, consume all of them at once, and gain 50, 60 Gaze of Orbis from just killing a single boss. This means that you could potentially gain yourself a very massive boost in corruption at once on either your main character if you're looking to push corruption very high. If these drop relatively often, and I'm hoping these are not going to be from the Pinnacle Boss only. I hope these just drop from both him and all the Harbingers. This is not only going to give you an incentive to go out and fight the Harbingers, but it's going to potentially allow you to progress even faster on both your alts and your main characters. I think all these changes that are coming for Season 2 are going to be really good. I like that they're making corruption pushing faster, as that slog felt like a pretty annoying pain point for a lot of people, while at the same time, them giving us a new mechanic and new bosses to interact with. That is not everything that is coming with Season 2. In a few days, we're going to be getting another blog post that's going to be talking about all the quality of life features that are coming with Season 2, such as a complete rework of how corruption works in general. We don't really know the details of that, but the devs said thousands of corruption are not going to be possible anymore, as well as new additions to the loot filter, such as legendary potential now being something that is filterable. And of course, we are getting some pretty massive reworks to Sentinel and potentially some pretty big reworks to Primalist as well, which should hopefully bring those back into the spotlight as top tier classes. I'm looking forward to both the patch notes and to the blog post on all of the quality of life features. And of course, we'll be covering them as soon as they're available to let everyone be on the same page for everything that we can expect in Season 2. I'm really looking forward to it. I think this is going to be very fun. I'm excited to potentially play some new Sentinel and Primalist builds that potentially might be really strong with all the buffs that are going to be coming to the classes. And I'm just looking forward to testing out how the new boss is going to be and how all the new corruption progression is going to feel. If you have any questions on anything that we discussed here, feel free to leave a comment in the comments below. I'll be more than happy to help you as soon as I can. I also stream on Twitch every single day, so feel free to come by Twitch and ask any questions there. I'd be more than happy to help you live or discuss any sort of topics you might want to discuss there. With all said, kitties, I hope you enjoyed this video. I hope you all enjoy Season 2, and I hope to see you all in the next video.